Hey there, readers and adventurers.
And welcome to the first episode of Becca's Book Club Adventure. I'm Becca.
And I'm Matt.
And we're so glad you're here to escape reality with us as we dive into our favorite stories, characters, and fantasy worlds.
Yeah, I mean, who's sponsoring this one, Becca?
This week's episode is brought to you by Daydreaming. Daydreaming, the anytime activity for escaping your current situation. Goes great with blank staring, white noise, uncomfortable social situations, and your job. Side effects may include the fear of missing out, important moments in your children's lives, or questions from your boss. Use as directed by your conscience.
Nice. Becca and I read just about everything. But other than daydreaming, what we really share a love for is our fantasy books. So in future episodes, we'll be reading and reacting to books, probably a lot of first reads, maybe some rereads. But for this inaugural episode, we thought we'd introduce ourselves and discuss our origin stories and talk a little bit of romantasy.
So sit back and relax as we dive into our adventures reading.
Oh man, our adventure into fantasy, huh? Okay, well, I guess let's just start with some basics about us.
I'm Becca. I'm in my early 30s. Obviously have a dog, or two. Her name is Delilah. Duxie's in the corner. I live in southeastern Ohio, and I'm a pharmacist. And you?
I'm Matt. I'm in my late 30s. Thank you. I live in central Ohio, and I work in software, which is such a joy. I know you because...
You married my sister.
Yes. I married your sister. I think I met you when you were just starting college. Something like that. I don't remember you graduating high school, but I do remember helping you move into your first apartment at college. But, at the time, I don't remember very well because I was a little bit focused on your sister and not you.
That's absolutely more than fair. I remember you a little bit earlier because of growing up in church together. Probably less you, more your mom and your family, and church bells, because of course we all had to play the church bells.
Yeah, it was as a definite obligation for sure. But moving out of that nightmare and into the present, you just came home. You were in Norway for 10 days, 14 days?
12 days.
12 days. I was right there. Okay, I have so many questions. Okay, first of all, how was it? What was it like? What did you do? Give me a big picture and we'll dive into it, because Norway sounds awesome.
It was absolutely spectacular. I think coming from Ohio, where we had a pretty decent snow this year, it's so crazy to see snow in a whole different perspective out there, especially because they plow not only their roads, but also their sidewalks. And they don't use salt, they just use gravel. Just throw some gravel on top of the ice, and it works phenomenally, to be honest with you. But the downtown was really cute. I mean, it's a coastal city, so we got to see all the ships going in and out. We did the sauna experience, where we were in a hot sauna. We jumped into the Arctic Ocean, where there was ice floating around us. Got back out into the sauna and went back and forth a few times, which was a ton of fun. Learned how to cross-country ski, and they have ski trails all around the island, which is really cool. That's their mode of transportation. They don't have snow days. If you can't get to your car, you put your skis on.
And how do the skis work with the gravel?
Two different trails.
Okay, gotcha. So how does the gravel work? Does it just create friction that texture that you walk on, even though it's icy in between, or?
Yep, it gives you enough to kind of just be able to set your foot down. So you still have to be kind of careful, but if you come from an icier place, from Ohio, it was fine. But if you came from Florida where you've never seen it, probably rough.
You'd be screwed. So it's probably a lot like putting chains on your tires in Wisconsin or Canada. Yeah.
It
Okay.
was funny. There were all these like PSAs about like Arctic winter driving and like basically if you don't know how to do it, please don't rent a car. Just hire someone to take you wherever you want to go. So we signed up for a guide and the guide also rents cars on the side. And so when we told him we were from Ohio, he's like, "I'll rent you a car." And we were both like, "No. No. We'll hire you to drive us." No.
I'm here for the experience, not the anxiety.
Right. He's like, "You can drive in the winter." I'm like, "Not this kind of winter."
I can, but there's a difference between being able to do something and being able to do it well.
Yeah.
So the sauna. I think I saw some pictures of this, but we all know that pictures aren't actually real life. Were you actually in like a regular like bikini type bathing suit the entire time, or did you know? Okay, so you guys did not put on like any thermal
Nope.
water stuffs. That's crazy. How long were you in the water? The
Oh,
cold
like
water.
less than a minute, right? So you like there was a big swim area, which obviously we didn't swim. So like we would jump off one side of it and would swim to the ladder on the other side. That's as brave as we got. So probably less than 45 seconds.
Okay, so it's almost like a little bit of an Ohio reference, but it's like jumping into Mirror Lake before
Yeah.
the Michigan game. You just kind of get in and get right back out, and only the
Yep.
idiots stay in longer and die. Right. Okay.
Yeah, there was
I
another
shouldn't
couple
say
there
that.
that was like hanging out in the ice cold water for a while, and I was like, "You do you, but that's not for me."
Have you ever done like cold plunges, like here at home or whatever, with the what is it like ice baths and stuff?
No, but anytime a
No.
sauna has like an ice plunge afterwards, I'm totally game for it. We went to the
Nice.
like bathhouse that they have for the island, and that's what we did on our last day was go back and forth from the sauna to the 12 degrees Celsius water.
So what does that translate to? Like 30 something degrees
I think it's about
Fahrenheit?
40,
40 degrees Fahrenheit?
low 40s, maybe
Okay.
50.
That's still freaking cold.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but for people listening, the part of Norway you're in the coastal part of Norway, but it's like as far north in Norway as you can go almost.
Yep, so we were in
Yeah.
Tromsø, which is considered in the Arctic Circle. So we went to some fun museums. So we went to the Polar Museum, and the Polar Museum is basically dedicated to all of the polar expeditions that were like run throughout history, because most of them left from Tromsø to go up to the North Pole,
Oh,
which is kind of interesting.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So you did all the outdoor scenery stuff. How does that compare to the food and the drink?
So the Northern Lights, the reindeer, all the snow, absolutely wonderful. The food and drink I thought was good, but it is like Scandinavian food and drink, right? So like they have lots of liquor laws. So like you can't go to the grocery store and buy alcohol unless it's beer. And we learned a little bit about their history with beer, which was interesting, right? So Christianity came through Europe, wiped out all these things, right? Beer didn't exist in Norway, in Tromsø, Norway, till the monks arrived, the Christian monks. And they saw that they were drinking hard liquor, and they were like, "You know what'll solve this problem? Lighter alcohol. Let me give you some beer." So there's one brewery on the island, which we did visit, and they had excellent beer. And it was all like Arctic themed, which was a ton of fun. And we had
What's
Go ahead.
what's the beer like? So here in the States, you can get all of the like really watery pilsners and domestics, but then you can get into like the heavy IPAs and stuff. Is the stuff in Norway similar to that, or are we talking more like the Belgian beers, or are you talking more like the German type beers?
I'd say probably closer to what we have here. They had like the lighter pilsners on the draft. They have my favorite wit style beer on draft.
Nice.
They had some IPAs, but I didn't see any like bocks or triples like you would in Belgium,
Okay.
and nothing that was like Rheingeist approved by the Germans, except maybe the
Nice.
pilsner.
Okay. So I also asked you about the food. What's the Scandinavian fare like?
So
What are they eating?
reindeer is a super popular meat because of just the herding that goes on with reindeers and the way that all works.
Okay, sure.
Makes sense.
I mean,
And
sounds pretty typical.
yep. Makes excellent stew. I didn't like it when it was jerkied. But we did a food tour, and we got to try on the food tour whale, which is a really polarizing thing. So you can only try whale in Iceland, Norway, and Japan. And the practices around whaling are maybe not the best. But Norway does have some pretty stringent rules in place to make sure it's sustainable, like only certain types of whales and only when the population's large enough. And by certain types, I think it's just minke whale, if I'm right. Could be wrong. But it was tasty. And then we had cloudberry jam and bilberry jam. And bilberries are their version of blueberries. And instead of like, you know how when you bite into a blueberry and it's white in the center?
Yeah.
They're purple all the way through. So it stained our tongue and teeth.
Oh, so that's what that. I was going to ask you what that picture was. You and your husband just were like tongues out in a picture like it's like 2005 or something.
Yep.
Okay.
And then of course the seafood was absolutely phenomenal.
What kind of seafood we talking? Like I know that they have like Arctic char, which is like similar to trout or salmon hybrid. But like, were you guys also getting like shrimp and mollusks and octopus and stuff like that, or what did they have?
No, mostly fish. So we had a lot of salmon while we were there, and a lot of char, and then cod. Had the best fish and chips I've ever had there.
So, are you guys going to go back? Is it worth it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
We really loved it.
So, okay, how long is that plane ride?
So I think in total we spent about 24 hours getting out and 24 hours coming back between layovers and plane flights.
So, plenty of time to read?
Yep. I managed to finish 3 books. Well, 2.5 books. The other one I finished this weekend.
And what were they?
So one of them was, I think it was called The Glass Mountain, and it's like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and finished that really, really quick. It was really good, a little predictable, right? It's a retelling of a well-known story, but that was highly enjoyable. And then I read one, I forget the title exactly, but it was something like Baking with Dragons, or like baking, it was a murder mystery.
Okay, Baking with Dragons, sure.
Yeah, it was a murder mystery, and it's a group of women that run this town in their 50s that all bake all the time, and they couldn't let the police just take over the case. They had to solve the case with them. But, you know, they have dragons as pets, and they were all described as these teeny tiny little things that are like cat-sized.
Is it like Hagrid's Norbert when it's born and it never grows any bigger? What?
Like, they're trying to, like, cover up the dragon's existence, and there's like teacups on the floor and pastries on the floor, and so she tells the cop, "Oh no, it's food for the pixies."
For the, pixies. I have lots of those. They're also typical pixies, dragons.
Right. And then the other one was just a typical story that we get in Romantasy, right? So it's a young 18-year-old girl who doesn't know anything about her strength and her powers, and she doesn't have parents, and this old woman helped raise her, and she lived in a closet with rags. And this man comes to grab her, and things go bad. And, typical story. But they fall in love. And now they're off to save the world. Book 2, more to come.
Okay. I mean, are you going to read book 2? Was it good enough?
I think so, yeah. It was one of those nice stories where they're only like 300-ish pages. So even if you're like not fully committed to it, it doesn't take you long to get through. And I do like when you don't have that full commitment sometimes.
So I know that your husband is super into Lord of the Rings. I'm not exactly sure the last holiday I've had where the Lord of the Rings movies did not play in their totality. It might be pre-pandemic.
When I had you read Tolkien's poem at our wedding, I didn't quite understand what I was getting myself into.
I'm guessing LOTR was like is that his first fantasy love, and he's just like never moved on from it? Yeah.
Probably.
Okay. Okay, so that's his gateway drug, and he's still using. Um, but like, okay, how did you stumble into fantasy?
So I loved at the beginning when you talked about how we read everything because I was thinking about it and I was like, well, at this point in my life, I read scientific literature and fantasy, and that is about it. But my first foray into fantasy was probably like fifth grade, sixth grade, and I read this series called The Warriors by Aaron Hunter,
Okay.
and it is about the Thunder Clan cats. And this lone home cat named Rusty who wanders into the ThunderClan cats, into this world of cat clans and needing to save the world. And there's probably like 60-ish books in the series between this clan and this cat, and then some of the other stories that go off on it. And the thing that I remember so much is like in the first chapter of it, they're talking about Rusty who leaves the human world, right? And he's crossing what we know as a street, but he called it a river of blackness. And you can't cross the river of blackness because you could die. You could die because a car will drive over you. And so I just love the author's way that she, really described things from a cat's point of view. And so I liked that being able to turn worlds on their heads and think about things from a different perspective.
So you were like 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
And when did you move on from, what did you call it, the Warriors?
Yeah.
The Warrior Cats? The Warriors.
I think the book series is called The Warriors, but I think you'll find it best
okay.
if you Google The Warrior Cats.
What did you read after that? Do you remember?
I
That was
think after that comes Harry Potter.
Harry, right on.
Yeah. Or maybe somewhere in between that.
So I was also 10, 11, 12 when I got into fantasy for the first time. I mean, the people listening don't know. I am the youngest of four children. My oldest sister is a decade older than I am. And in 1999, when I was that age, she decided that it was going to be a good idea to give me the first book to the Wheel of Time series. If you're not familiar with the Wheel of Time, it is like one of the best-selling fantasy series of all time, and Robert Jordan, the author, is considered to be like the person that took Tolkien's mantle and actually made something of it, right? But it's like 15 books long, and just the amount of description and world building is just no 10-year-old should be reading this, is as I guess what I'm trying to say. But my sister gave it to me, and I was hooked. I don't know if Harry Potter had really made it big in the States yet at that time. Like the first book might have been out, but it wasn't publicized. And as a 10, 11-year-old, whatever, you kind of read what other people give you. It's not like you're going to the bookstore and like looking around, and Book Talk didn't exist to give you recommendations. And
If it's not in the Scholastic School Fair, you have no choice. It's either coming from your parents or a teacher.
Exactly. So because Robert Jordan was compared to Tolkien on like all of the book reviews and everything, and I think I was calling him Tolkien when I was that age. I was like, who the hell is this dude? So that's how I stumbled on Lord of the Rings, and that's what I started reading after I read the first couple Wheel of Time books. So like that was a good time. And then I didn't finish the Wheel of Time until Brandon Sanderson finished it after Robert Jordan died in like 2015.
Ah, that's kind of what
2016.
sparked the TV series, right?
Yeah. So, which we'll get into the TV series later. That's a whole thing.
Well, it sounds like I need to do some reading and watching before we get there.
Uh, that's a lot of reading, Becca. But if you want to borrow the books, I have multiple paperback copies, and I have all of them in hardback, and there you go.
Yeah, I might have to. It's been on the TBD or the TBR for a very long time.
I think it's worth it, but it's a commitment. I'll say that. But like the Romantasy books that we read, like you can get into some of these series, like Throne of Glass, for example. There's what, including the prequel, there's 8 books, and like that sounds like a commitment, but it's not, because they're so. I don't. I don't mean this in a bad way, but like they're so easy to read.
They're very approachable.
Yeah, they're very consumable. Um, Whereas things like Tolkien and Robert Jordan, and it's like reading like the American version of Tolstoy. Oh shit.
After the third poem, you're like, okay, is this a song? Is this relevant? I can't sing this without hearing the melody.
And what sucks about those worlds, actually, this is what's great about it. It sucks that I have the personality I do. You read these poems, or you read the lyrics to the song they're singing, and you immediately have to try to put the words to some type of melody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're on the internet looking up like Irish drinking songs and shit, and trying to find the one that has like the right like feeling
Cadence.
to the words you're reading. So then you're doing that, and then you're trying to like change the words to be British or Irish accented in your mind, which is a lot easier in your head than coming out your mouth.
Yep.
But now you've spent like a week on a paragraph of text in this book. Oh man. So that's how I got into fantasy all them years ago. A little different than your story.
So what is it that led you to the Romantasy world?
Well, you forced Sarah J. Maas on me. I really think you were trying to give ACOTAR and Throne of Glass to your sister,
A little bit, yeah.
and she didn't want to have anything to do with anything. And here I am, and I'm like, ooh, books. So I still have the big like shopping bag that's like this big, down in my basement, of all the Throne of Glass books in there. So it was, you gave me all of the ACOTAR and all of the Throne of Glass books, and I don't know, it was like the beginning of 2024, the spring of 2024, or something like that. I'd never read anything like that before, and I was like, I mean, sure, why not? The world's going to shit, and I need some type of escapism. I mean, maybe I had read something like that before. I don't know if you're familiar with The Sword of Truth by Terry Goodkind. So for anybody out there that's read The Sword of Truth by Terry Goodkind, I'm kind of making a little bit of a leap to connect them. But like it is, it's a very basic good versus evil thing, where the main male character falls in love with the main female character, but they can't be together because their magics are incompatible, and
A little Romeo and Juliet-esque.
a little bit. And the countries they come from are incompatible and at war, and all this stuff. And then the main male character gets kidnapped by like a magic wielding torturous dominatrix chick. Anyways, there's like some really weird like torture porn going on.
Oh no.
And that's the
That's a
connection I'm
rough
trying
start.
to make. But like, I'm gonna call it torture porn. But like, if Terry Goodkind was a female writer, we would just call it like fantasy smut, right? But it was like torture porn. So like, I read that a long time ago. But other than that, I'd never read anything from like romantasy or whatever. So, like, safe to say, I devoured all 5 ACOTAR books in, like, something crazy like 3 or 4 weeks. I didn't do so hot living day to day because I wasn't sleeping. I was just sort of reading nonstop. Because Sarah J. Maas, this is what makes her a great writer, and then what makes her a terrible writer as somebody that's consuming her work. There is nowhere to put your bookmark. None. The story just keeps going.
I stayed up till 2 a.m. one time reading, and Matt knows I go to bed at 8 p.m. a lot of the nights. So the fact that I was still up at 2 a.m. reading, I was like, oh, I am hooked. This is a problem.
Yeah, but like, so I read all of those, and I hit them so hard that when I got done, I was like, oh man, have you ever watched like The Bachelor or Love is Blind or Too Hot to Handle or something like that? And like you love watching it. It's great. And then you get done with the season and you're like, I'm not sure if my IQ just took a hit or not. Like I need a little bit of time to recover from this. I did that with ACOTAR. I didn't read any other Romantasy until like Christmas of 2024. And I just read like other fantasy fiction books and like Civil War books and some philosophy books and blah, blah, blah. But then when I was at your house for Christmas, I brought the first couple Throne of Glass books and I started reading those like a couple days before Christmas. And I finished that series at the end of February. So that one took me about 2 months.
I think that one's a little harder to get through.
Yeah. And so at that point, that's all of the Romantasy that I have read. Is SJM all of the Romantasy? No, you read some shit on the plane. What am I talking about? Stupid question.
And I've read lots of stuff that I found off of Hoopla or Libby, the other library app, and a lot of dragon-centric stuff. But I think you brought it up, right? So like the torture porn versus smut concept. I think it's hard when you're going and you're trying to explore because for me, something that's really important when I read a book is for it to be consensual. If it's not consensual, then it's creepy, right? And so I think that's the big difference when like things smut get labeled as like sexy, but like, yeah, but it's consensual, whereas many other artists that do things within fantasy aren't doing consensual activities, which is where I think some of the turnoff for fantasy can really come for a lot of different people.
It's pretty interesting how easy it is to tell the gender of the writer based upon that very concept you just mentioned.
Yep. That's why I look for a lot of female writers.
I think I sent you a text message one time and I was like, I sometimes feel embarrassed to be a part of the male part of our race because like just I don't want to be that way, man.
Sex can be an absolutely wonderful thing if consensual.
Yeah. But how did you get into Romantasy? Because you were reading Warrior Cats, Becca. How did you get into?
Yeah, believe it or not, the Warrior Cats didn't have much sex in them, as a fifth grader, and they were definitely aimed at like children, young adults. It was not. There were no difficult young adult themes in that series per se. But I think what really got me started, I think it was the Black Witch Chronicles that I read first that kind of got me into it. And there is a theme in there that's not my favorite that tends to be in Romantasy, which is the love triangle concept. She does it pretty well, though, as far as love triangles can go. But I think that's kind of what kicked off my Romantasy over the past probably only a few years, right? So I finished pharmacy school in 2017, did my residency, didn't want to read. So thanks to Book Talk and Instagram, When I finally realized it was time to get back into reading, there were lots of good recommendations out there for fantasy-centric items.
Nice. Okay, so suffice it to say, you're a little more experienced than I am with this.
I think so, yeah.
So I was halfway through Kingdom of Ash, and um, I was like, I need to read other shit because this can't be the only author that does this, right? Um, so I was like, I need to ask Becca for like recommendations and shit. And I'm like, okay, so, but like, I don't want to just read all the stuff that Becca has read, like 8, 10 years ago. That's that's boring. Like, we should read stuff together. And if we're gonna read stuff together, I want to talk to her about it because my entire life I've never had anybody to talk to about fantasy stuff. Like, I don't know if that's the boat you've found yourself in, but as a boy, if you're into like the fantasy world, it's like sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek, man stuff, right? And the fantasy stuff is like very nerdy and not cool. And so I was like, I'm talking to Becca about this shit. If we're gonna talk about it, we might as well record what we're talking about. That could be a podcast tool. And so here we find ourselves.
Yep. And I'm very
Um,
excited for this, right? Because, like, when I talk to my female friends about the Romantasy books we're reading, right, it's always like, oh, well, this one has, like a little bit of spice. Or, like, don't judge me. Like, I was reading it for the plot line. But also, we're here for the human experience. And so I'm excited, not only because I 100% read for the vibes of a book, but because I'm excited to talk about stuff because you have read so much more classical literature than me, and I know that these themes are not new. None of these themes are
no.
new. And so connecting these to some bigger pieces of art would be really fascinating to me.
Well, okay, so we'll definitely do that. I think since the only romantasy that I have in my repertoire at the moment is ACOTAR and Throne of Glass, I think we should talk about those for this episode.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so which one did you like more?
Oh, okay. So I think that's really tough. If you went on how long it took me to read the series, I'm pretty sure ACOTAR went faster. Although I had to laugh when I had my like Goodreads update for the year. They were like, "It took you a really long time to finish A Court of Silver and Silver
That's
Flames."
rude.
I was like, "Yeah, it did. It did take me a long time." But what I liked about Throne of Glass is because I didn't immediately consume the content. Like I took some breaks between some of the books because they were just so thick and full of plotline that I was like, oh, I need a deep breath. It lasted me a lot longer between all having 8 books and then also the books being a little more difficult to read. So I think as far as a reread go, I need to reread Throne of Glass because I know I missed something because I read for vibes. But I will read for the vibes for ACOTAR again in a heartbeat.
I I think I can safely say that I liked Throne of Glass more. Um, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I didn't like ACOTAR. ACOTAR was awesome. So ACOTAR did things to me. I've never felt that way. Like we're adults here, right? I've never read books that make me feel hopeful and have like longing. Like, why isn't my relationship that way? And then like you just have all this like pent up like horniness for days after reading different parts, and you're like, what do I do with this? I don't. What am I feeling? I have to go to work. What is happening here? Like really, really good. But like I think ACOTAR is really more of Sarah J. Maas having fun retelling other story fairy tales.
Yes, the
And then they kind of morphed.
Yeah.
But like Throne of Glass is much more unique. And I think that the characters are better.
Yes.
Better might be too strong of a word. More complex,
Deeper.
more gray, more deep, more oscillating. ACOTAR is much more of like a fairy tale where things are a little bit more cartoonish, black and white, like good versus evil, and that's not a bad thing. It's just harder. It was so much easier to get buried in the Throne of Glass world for me.
Yes. Because, like, I liked Feyre from the beginning. She did some questionable things throughout the series where I was like, that's not your brightest move, but okay. I can support that revenge. That seems fun. Whereas in Throne of Glass, I hated Selena in the beginning. I was like, wait, you're kind of an asshole. And then I was like, oh, wait, that's why I like you.
See, I didn't have your immediate gut reaction to this chick is a bitch. I was like, oh my god, you are you're the female version of every cocky, lovable male main character ever. Like
Yeah.
100%, she immediately reminded me of Han Solo, just with her swagger and cockiness.
That's
Just
a
like
really good comparison.
walk into a room and own it. I was just like, "Oh, you are cool. I am going to the bar with this lady." Right? And then it's like she's 16 and I'm like, "I am not going to the bar with this lady." Like
They're always 16
they can drive. It's okay.
in the fantasy land that has no cars.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I think like I think I liked the magic system in ACOTAR better than the magic system in Throne of Glass. The magic system in ACOTAR was very elemental. So it makes a little bit more sense who has what and why and what it can do. I think the concept of different magic users having different levels of power was also a lot more clear and understandable. Whereas in Throne of Glass, like I like the magic system. Don't get me wrong, but some of it was just taken for granted. So like the Fae always have two forms,
Yeah.
and it just is. It's not explained why.
Why? Or
Why are
how?
you human and Fae or Fae and a hawk
Right.
type of a thing? And then like the whole shifting between your two forms is never completely explained in that entire book series. It's just like you have to emotionally let go and you can get there kind of a thing. And then it's almost like it doesn't matter if you have like ice magic or fire magic or Dorian's raw magic or shape shifting, right? If your mind can conceive of something, you can do it. And while that's fun and it's a great like Deus Ex Machina type of thing for SJM to use, it also when you're reading things, you're like, oh yeah, sure, okay, of course, we'll just save the day with this new thing that just is now because somebody had some mental epiphany. But like it was really fun to read when that stuff would happen. I like the ACOTAR magic system of things being a little bit more bound, like in physics and biology and that kind of a thing. It's a little bit more understandable.
Yes, you immediately knew what was going on with the magic in ACOTAR, whereas Throne of Glass, you were like slowly introduced to it throughout the books, right? Because, you know, the first book, like no one has magic because it's been suppressed for yada 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 reasons, and then it comes to light later how it all comes out, and then you feel like every book you're learning a new rule, and you're like, okay, but does that contradict what I first learned, or is that in congruence with what I first learned? Because now I'm confused.
Yeah, and like then you have like in Throne of Glass you have like magic that is not magic.
Yep.
What? So like we could talk about word marks, or we could talk about the Vogue's like weird black power, whatever that is. But like even just so in the world, magic doesn't exist anymore because it has been like paused by the forces that be. Right, that's how we're introduced to Airly. But like what happened was the people, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but the people in the world did a magical spell to pause magic. So like I have certain questions, right? After you do this spell and magic is paused, how does your spell continue to pause magic?
Great question.
Wouldn't pausing the magic kind of like cancel out the magic you know what I mean? It's confusing.
Right. Unless there was like a finite time period in which it would work, but obviously that wasn't part of the storyline for it of like, oh yeah, we set the spell and the spell works for a decade.
Yeah, so and then within that, so you don't have the magic, but then there are other things you can do that essentially act as magic, but they're not magic. What? Like, but yeah, in ACOTAR, everything is very clearly defined. Like, you understand why Feyre is so special.
Yes.
It's not just like the chosen one. It's actually like kind of almost based in magical physics or something. That this is a thing, and like that's really cool. But because it's so much like more lighthearted, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's war and there's like anxiety when you're reading those books, but it's definitely the fairy tale where it's good's always going to win. The good guys are going to win. You know what I mean? Whereas in Throne of Glass, everybody is so gray, and you don't really understand people's motives all of the time.
Yeah, you're expecting people to backstab people.
And then like people that are like cartoonishly bad at the beginning of the series kind of end up to be like in a gray zone by the end of the series, where yeah, they did a whole lot of bad stuff, but they had their own reasons for doing that bad stuff, and it's like, oh, so you're actually kind of like a good person that was trying to make the best out of a shit cocktail, you know?
I did like that with the Throne of Glass, though, how she tied characters in from very early in the series to very late in the series, and you're like, oh my god, I know that person!
She did that really well, by the way. Usually when you have those callbacks, like in other franchises, it almost feels forced. Where if you can imagine the author like whiteboarding how their next book is going to go, and they get to like a decision point, and they're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen here. Like the main character can't make it happen. Oh, I know, I'll resurrect somebody from book one, and they'll just happen to have the answer. And right, but Sarah J. Maas did it like really well, where the people just sort of slid back in there, and
their stories
really,
made sense.
It really like. So Sarah J. Maas is a little bit upsetting. Do you realize that Sarah J. Maas is like just a couple years younger than I am?
No.
She started writing Throne of Glass when she was in high school. It didn't get published. She was like publishing chapters onto some type of like forum or blog type thing in college. And then she got the first book published like 6 months after she graduated from college. So the reason I say she's frustrating is her first attempt at fantasy is Throne of Glass. And Throne of Glass is epic. It is really good. Like, really good. Like, what were you doing when you were 18?
Not that.
Yeah, when
Nothing memorable.
when I was 20, I was like a college dropout touring around in a band trying to be a rock star. But no, she's just like, I'm going to be a writer. And she's really good at it. It's so frustrating. I mean, good for her. I'm not mad at her, jealous or anything.
No.
Just like...
Just like a little jealous.
A little jealous. I mean, it's not like she made a whole shit ton of money off of her writing until like the pandemic when things like blew up. So there must have been a lot of lean, difficult years, but the writing is good.
It is. Well, and it's interesting to hear the speculation over what books she's going to gift us next and where the series will go and whether Throne of Glass will have another book or ACOTAR will have another book. I think theories lean towards ACOTAR more, but it'll be interesting to see.
Speaking of new things that are coming out, I'm sure you saw the news that like Disney or Hulu, right? Disney owns Hulu, whatever.
One and the same.
They had the rights to make an ACOTAR TV show, and they just recently mentioned that nope, we're not doing that anymore. It just got dropped. It's scrapped. Like, I have definite feelings on that. What are your feelings on that?
Pretty upset because that's the kind of content I like to consume in like as far as TV watching goes, right? So we're on the plane and we watch Dune Part 1, and then this weekend we finished Dune Part 2. Have you seen Dune at all?
No, I have not seen Dune, and I haven't read the book either.
Okay. Well, the way it was compared was like if you were to take Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and put them together, right? So it's got this really complex magic system, and you've got these complex characters, all these different worlds like you would have in Star Wars. So it's good. It's right up our alley. The Part 1 movie, Matt, is 2.5 hours, and the Part 2 movie of the first book is another 2 hours and 45 minutes. Now, I love that they did that book justice, and they gave a lot to it. I cannot tell you how much time was spent in artistic components of it. Again, wonderful, so love it. I have the attention span of a rat, so I had a really hard time watching it. And so we watch Part 2, we finish that up, and we're like, go on a walk. We come back, and we're like, the new Dungeons and Dragons movie is on Netflix. We should watch that. I kid you not, that is one of the best movies I've seen in a really long time.
You're not the only person I've heard say that, by the way.
And I'm like, they need more movies like this. So I feel like it's in the same vein as ACOTAR, and it would be that lighthearted, kind of comical, but also fantasy retelling world that would be fun to dive into.
Well, do you think ACOTAR is right for a TV show, or would it do better as a movie? And actually, same question about Throne of Glass, and I guess you could just kind of compare and contrast those things.
I think ACOTAR would make a better movie. I could see it being a good TV series as well. And maybe some of the later books might need more time than a movie would tell you. But people make 3-hour movies these days. Mm-hmm. We're past the hour 15-minute Disney movies we were raised on.
For shame. Those are some of the best movies ever.
But I think Throne of Glass would have to be a TV series because it's very much like Game of Thrones, where there's a lot of characters, a lot of components to it that you would really need to be able to spell out, and you can't skip a whole lot to kind of get to the gist. You really need to follow things, otherwise things later won't make sense.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with you. So obviously, ACOTAR, there's 4 books and then a Christmas special mini thing. But the way I think of it is she's gonna write more ACOTAR. I think that's pretty clear. And so as it stands right now, the first 3 ACOTAR books are a complete arc. It's a complete story in and of itself. So I'm almost thinking of this as a Lord of the Rings trilogy, or maybe Star Wars movies is a better comparison, where they could make each of the first 3 books into a movie. And those movies could be 2 hours long, 3 hours long, whatever they wanted to do. And I think they could be really, really good. And then they could make 3 other movies when there is enough books out, to tell Nesta's story or Elaine's story or whatever. I think that they would do better as movies because there's less complexity to try to explain to people. When you have that really easy concepts of good versus bad, I think it translates into tighter writing confines.
Mm-hmm.
But Throne of Glass, I think, definitely needs to be a TV series because like even though Throne of how long is that series? Like, okay, if you take out Assassin's Blade, you take out the prequel, she's 17 at the beginning of Throne of Glass? 18.
Yeah, 18, I think.
How old is she at the end of the series? Does she even turn 20?
I was gonna say, I think the whole series is a year long.
Okay, yeah. So like there's like a crap ton that happens in there. And I like with all the characters and the gray areas, like I think that needs to be a TV show. I think you could take that and you could make it into, because I mean, because the like it would just really suck if you only get like 6 episodes a season,
Yeah, no, you
kind
would
of a
need
thing.
like 12 episodes a season.
Like 15, 20 even. Because then if you did that, you could combine a whole bunch of books into a single season. It wouldn't need to be one book at a time, because some of those books span like 2 weeks, 2 months.
Yeah. Well, and you could
Um,
have each episode with a different character's point of view because she does
yeah.
that from chapter to chapter, which is one of the more phenomenal things about her writing. You really get that inner monologue perspective of different characters.
And with that, I think Disney or Hulu would be a bad choice.
Yeah.
I think Netflix or Prime would also be a bad choice. I think like you need like a Showtime or HBO or something like that, because like Throne of Glass is gritty and dark
Yes.
and gory AF. Like some of the shit that Selena does, I gotta see that on screen.
Yep.
Oh man. Like there is not a lot of sex in the Throne of Glass series.
Nope.
I mean, it's there, but it's no more nor no less than a regular fantasy series, quite frankly.
I mean, I think you have pining for the first three books. Like, there's nothing that actually happens.
Yeah, I don't think SJM wanted to pop her author cherry, you know.
Gotta save that for a few books in.
So like, yeah, I think ACOTAR would do really well as movies, and Throne of Glass would do much better as a like R-rated, 18 plus dark HBO series or something. And
Well, I
I
think,
think if they did it right, it would blow Game of Thrones out of the water.
yeah. And I think the writer's potential for writing the script with Throne of Glass, there's so many different ways you could take that. I would want to see different points of view, different angles that they do take it, because you could get so creative with it. Whereas, like, ACOTAR, there's kind of like maybe a few right ways to do it, but not many right ways to do it.
I think you would have to be pretty true to the source material with ACOTAR. Because everything in ACOTAR is so on the nose, and it's so like you have all the different courts. You have like the four courts that are the four seasons, and then you have the day, dawn, and night courts. And so like you can't really combine those things and keep the concepts the same.
Yeah.
Like you can't have a I don't even know what an equivalent would be. Like in meals, it would be like brunch. You can't do that with summer and winter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And they play very different roles in the story.
Yeah. And like you have to have the other continent of Highburn, because like that's the big bad, right? But like in Throne of Glass, you could kind of downsize the world slightly. Slightly. So, for example, you don't necessarily need Assassin's Blade to be a part of the TV show. That can be like done in flashbacks or something like that. And if you don't include that, then you don't need to explain the Red Desert and that entire part of the world with I don't remember the name of the city down there, but it always reminded me of Alexandria. And then you don't need like the waste. That could just be something that the witches talk about, but you don't actually ever have to go there.
Right.
You could even, I don't know, like Windland could, in some way, shape, or form, be sort of like Highburn, where you're not really there, but it's a thing that's known and evil and on the periphery. So like you could decrease the scope of the world a little bit if you wanted and really get into the story, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and
So
you could
like,
take a character approach, a plot approach. Like there's so many different ways you could focus the.
yeah, like to what you were saying, I think you're right. They have more creative liberties that they could take with Throne of Glass. I think ACOTAR is you got to be like right there. I don't know if there's much else to talk about with them. They're really good. I had not heard, you brought this up at the beginning, I had not heard the concept that another Throne of Glass book was coming, or could be a possibility.
I feel like some people heard the ACOTAR stuff in another book, and Throne of Glass maybe got caught around. But sometimes when you read Reddit, you're like, "Is this real, or are you just putting this out here to make us confused?" So it might not be a thing.
Okay.
I think it's too complete to be a thing.
I know that ACOTAR, I know she has a contract for like another couple books. And I know in Crescent City she has a contract for another book or two. And I heard rumors that the publishing house had gotten her to like even create a completely new series.
Oh.
Or that she pitched it and they're buying into it. I don't know what that would be, but given that her three current worlds are all interlinked, I'm wondering how she continues to expand like her little universe with a fourth telling or world or whatever.
I don't know. I need to see this third world first before I can speculate any further. We need to make it into Crescent City.
Right, which actually, so that's a perfect segue. So, to your point, I think we should expand our Romantasy knowledge, and I think we should start with Crescent City. So, there is going to be a new ACOTAR book, and I've heard that you will need to have read Crescent City in order to appreciate the new ACOTAR book, which to me says there's going to be some type of crossover. So, like, I think we should dive into Crescent City next.
Yeah, I'm excited for Bryce. Apparently she's spunky. So maybe now that I have Selena character background and I think of her as a Han Solo, maybe I won't think she's a bitch in the beginning and I'll go straight for it.
So, with that being said, if any of you readers and adventurers out there have any advice on how best to like chunk up the first Crescent City book, you should definitely hit us up. You can email us at bookclubbybecca@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at Becca's Book Club Adventure, all one word, all lowercase. I think we're gonna try to read the first 8 or 9 chapters. I think it's doable, but is it doable while also having some type of podcast episode put together while dealing with work and our significant others? If any of you readers and adventurers don't have any suggestions though, feel free to just hit us up, send us feedback. Tell me about how I mansplain stuff and I should let Becca talk more. Or maybe you have some book recommendations on other things that we should read. We'd love to hear from you, and if we do, we very well might feature you in the next episode.
So next week on Becca's Book Club Adventure, we'll feature our synopsis and reactions to the first chunk of House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. If you hear from us before that, it'll be about something else, maybe meal prep.
Maybe meal prep. So until next time, keep daydreaming and keep reading.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.